Did you clap for nurses during the pandemic?
Of course, everyone did, yes.
That's right, they clapped for nurses, they called them heroes, and then gave them a crappy real terms pay cut.
Are you comfortable that they're now using food banks in order to be able to survive?
Well, I mean, I go to my food banks quite a lot and ask, why is it? What is it? What's the reason why people are there at food banks? And quite often when you go to food banks, it will be something will have happened. Something will have broken down, either a relationship or a boiler.
Nurses are using food banks and taking out payday loans to feed their families because they got a crappy real terms pay cut last year. You gave them a crappy real terms pay cut this year. You want to give them a crappy real terms pay cut next year, and all that's on top of a decade of crappy real terms pay cuts. The reality is a decade of Tory austerity has left the average frontline nurse more than £6,000 a year worse off due to wages failing to keep up with the rate of inflation. Is it any wonder new research suggests that over a third of the nursing workforce is considering leaving due to poor pay and working conditions? That's not good when you've got a desperate shortage of 47,000 nurses. This isn't just about pay, it's about patient safety.
There's a key message, I think, Kay, which is you cannot spend your way out of inflation.
Just a month ago, you were crashing the economy with plans to borrow billions upon billions of pounds to pay for tax cuts for the rich. You're still going ahead with uncapping bonuses for millionaire bankers, and MPs have just slapped themselves on the back with a massive £2,200 a year pay rise. The highest inflation in 40 years, the biggest drop in living standards since 1956, and the biggest fall in wages since records began has not been caused by nurses. It's the result of 12 years of Conservative government. Don't just take my word for it.
People's bills rising, everyone poorer. Energy bills doubling, inflation at a 40-year high.
You made millions pay more in income tax by changing the thresholds.
You have dragged very low earners into the 20% tax bracket, and before they didn't pay any tax.
We have tried a failed experiment.
You were Chancellor until a few weeks ago. UK growth is set to be the worst in the G20 besides Russia. Another study says we will go from 18th to 31st out of 38 OECD countries. Members here see their pound shrinking, probably as fast as they see their high streets closing.
Of course I want to see growth growing, Nick, right? Of course. Now, we have to think about how to do that.
Well, I don't think there's any point in going on strike anyway. I think it's, when we're in a position where we've got millions and millions of people waiting for operations or for help, waiting for medical help, and the only people who can give that medical help are largely our nurses and our doctors.
Let's not ignore the fact that we had over 4 million people waiting for treatment on the NHS in England before the pandemic. It was the result of a decade of underfunding by successive Conservative governments. Again, don't just take my word for it.
I'm afraid some of our hospitals are falling apart. The Queen Elizabeth Hospital in King's Lynn near me, bits of the hospital being held up by stilts.
Our nurses have always been there for us. Now let's be there for them by standing shoulder to shoulder with them and helping them to win the fair pay rise we all know they deserve.